Her friends mocked her for loving a black man until they saw who he really was. The champagne tasted like victory, but Simone Caldwell's smile felt like a mask. She stood on the rooftop terrace of the Sterling Hotel in downtown Charleston, surrounded by 200 guests celebrating her engagement to Preston Fairchild, the golden boy of old money Charleston society. Crystal chandeliers hung from white pergolas, string lights twinkled against the twilight sky, and everyone who mattered in their social circle had shown up to witness what her mother called the perfect union. But Simone couldn't stop staring at the kitchen entrance where the catering staff moved in coordinated silence, all black faces serving all white guests. She caught herself wondering if anyone else noticed, then immediately pushed the thought away. This was her engagement party. This was supposed to be the happiest night of her life. Preston's hand rested possessively on her lower back as he laughed with his fraternity brothers, planning their bachelor party in Hilton Head. Everything was exactly as it should be. So why did she feel like she was suffocating? Why did the diamond on her finger suddenly feel heavy as an anchor? Simone lifted her champagne flute and told herself the same lie she'd been telling for 28 years. Everything was fine. She was exactly where she belonged, and questioning anything would only complicate the comfortable life she'd inherited. Her father, Dalton Caldwell, raised his glass across the terrace, beaming with pride at his only daughter. She smiled back and drank deeply, washing down the uncomfortable questions that had started whispering in the back of her mind. Sunday brunch at the Caldwell estate was a sacred tradition, one that Simone's grandmother had established 60 years ago and that continued like clockwork every week. The dining room overlooked manicured gardens where Spanish moss draped from ancient oak trees, a view that had graced the covers of Southern Living magazine 3 times. Simone sat between her mother Vivienne and her best friend Paige Holloway, picking at eggs Benedict while the conversation swirled around her upcoming wedding. "I've already spoken to the club about the reception," her mother announced, consulting her leather-bound planner. "They're reserving the entire East Wing for us. Of course, we'll need to be particular about the guest list. The Montgomerys are members now, if you can believe it." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "New money from tech startups. They've let in all sorts lately." Paige leaned in, her voice dropping to match Vivienne's tone. "Did you hear about the Henderson's daughter? She's dating someone completely inappropriate. They're mortified." The way she said inappropriate made it clear she wasn't talking about his occupation or education. Simone's father joined in from across the table, his voice carrying the authority of 3 generations of Caldwell privilege. "The problem with this generation is they don't understand the importance of preserving what we've built. Your great-grandfather didn't work this hard to establish our family's reputation just to have it diluted by poor choices." He looked directly at Simone. "You and Preston understand this. That's why you'll build something lasting." Simone nodded mechanically, the motion as practiced as breathing. She'd heard these conversations her entire life, the coded language that never said what it truly meant but communicated perfectly nonetheless. Appropriate. Our kind. Good families. Traditional values. Words that drew invisible lines around their world, keeping some people in and others permanently out. She excused herself to the powder room, catching her reflection in the antique mirror and barely recognizing the woman staring back. The historic Charleston Foundation Gala was exactly the kind of event where Simone was expected to shine. She wore an emerald Vera Wang gown that cost more than most people earned in 3 months, her hair falling in soft waves that had required 2 hours in a salon chair. Preston worked the room like a politician, his hand never leaving her elbow as he guided her from conversation to conversation with Charleston's elite. The development proposal for the East Side is exactly what that neighborhood needs. Preston was explaining to a cluster of investors near the bar. Property values have been stagnant for decades because, well, we all know why, but with the right infrastructure improvements and some strategic acquisitions, we can transform the entire area. Simone knew what he meant by, "we all know why," just as she knew what strategic acquisitions actually meant. Displacing the black families who'd lived there for generations to make room for luxury condos and artisanal coffee shops. She'd heard the pitch before, had even helped draft the marketing materials. But tonight, standing in her expensive gown, drinking expensive wine, something about it made her stomach turn. "Excuse me, could I get a refill?" She held out her empty glass to a passing server, barely glancing at him. When he hesitated, she looked up impatiently and met the eyes of a black man in his early 30s wearing a catering vest. Something in his direct gaze made her pause. He wasn't looking at her with the deferential service industry smile she expected. He was looking at her like he could see straight through the designer dress and practiced charm to something she'd been trying not to examine. "Champagne?" he asked, his voice deeper and more educated than she'd anticipated. She nodded mutely, accepting the fresh glass while her cheeks flushed with unexpected embarrassment. As he moved away, she caught Preston watching the interaction with a slight frown. "Darling, you don't need to thank the help," he murmured. "It's literally their job." Simone said nothing, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just failed some test she hadn't known she was taking. 3 days later, Simone's carefully constructed world began to crack. She was leaving Magnolia Coffee Company with her morning latte when she collided with someone on the sidewalk, sending her coffee cascading down the front of a navy suit jacket. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry!" She looked up and froze. It was him. The server from the gala, except he wasn't wearing a catering vest. He wore an impeccably tailored suit, carried a leather briefcase, and was checking an expensive watch as coffee dripped from his sleeve. "No harm done," he said, pulling out a handkerchief to blot the stain. His voice carried the same measured tone she remembered, now tinged with amusement. "Though I have a meeting in 15 minutes. Please let me pay for the dry cleaning." I wasn't watching where I was going. Simone fumbled in her purse for a business card, her hands shaking slightly. Why was she so flustered? She'd handled far more awkward situations with perfect composure. He glanced at her card and something flickered in his expression. "Caldwell and Associates. You're in real estate." It wasn't a question. "I'm Bryce Hamilton. I work at Morrison & Chen, the urban planning firm." He extended his hand and she shook. It automatically, her mind racing to reconcile the server from Saturday night with this confident professional. "But you were working the gala," she blurted out, then immediately regretted how it sounded. Bryce's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "I volunteer with the foundation. They were short-staffed, so I helped serve for a couple hours before heading home." "Shocking concept, I know. A black man in a suit who also knows how to carry a tray." The words hit her like a slap. "That's not what I meant," she stammered, but they both knew it was exactly what she'd meant. Bryce checked his watch again. "I really do have to run. That meeting I mentioned? It's about the East Side development proposal. Your firm is presenting, I believe." He met her eyes with that same penetrating gaze from the gala. "It should be interesting to see how your team plans to handle the displacement of 300 families." He walked away before she could formulate a response, leaving her standing on the sidewalk with an empty coffee cup and a growing sense of unease. Simone couldn't focus during the East Side presentation. She sat in the conference room at Caldwell and Associates, ostensibly taking notes while her father outlined their vision for urban renewal, but her mind kept replaying her encounter with Bryce Hamilton. She'd looked him up as soon as she got to the office. Morrison & Chen was one of the most respected urban planning firms in the Southeast. Bryce held a master's degree from MIT and had published papers on sustainable community development. He wasn't just educated, he was impressive, and she'd assumed he was a server. Not a volunteer helping out, not a professional taking a break from his real job, but simply a server, because he was black, because at a gala full of wealthy white people, she'd automatically relegated him to the role her unconscious bias had assigned. The realization sat in her stomach like a stone, getting heavier with each passing hour. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay next to Preston in his downtown penthouse, listening to him snore softly while she stared at the ceiling. When had she become this person? She thought back to college, to her women's studies classes where she'd written passionate papers about equality and justice. She'd believed in those things then. Or had she just believed in the idea of believing in them, safe in the knowledge that her actual life would never require her to challenge the systems that benefited her? Her phone buzzed with a text from Paige. "Bridal shower planning brunch tomorrow? We need to discuss the guest list." Simone stared at the message, thinking about who would be on that list and who wouldn't. All her friends looked like her, came from families like hers, held the same unexamined assumptions she was only now beginning to question. She thought about Bryce's words. 300 families. She'd seen the numbers in the proposal, had helped format the slides, but she'd never once thought about them as actual families with actual lives that would be upended. Preston stirred beside her, reaching out to pull her closer. "Can't sleep," he mumbled against her hair. She wanted to tell him about her encounter with Bryce, about the questions spiraling through her mind, but the words wouldn't come. How could she explain doubts she didn't fully understand herself? So she said nothing, letting him drift back to sleep while she lay awake watching shadows move across the ceiling, wondering when her comfortable life had started feeling like a cage. The city council meeting about the East Side development was standing room only. Simone attended with her father and Preston, expecting the usual procedural formality before approval. Instead, she watched Bryce Hamilton dismantle their entire proposal with surgical precision. He stood at the microphone in a charcoal suit, speaking without notes, his voice steady and commanding as he outlined the proposal's flaws. "The displacement study is incomplete," he explained, clicking through a presentation that made their firm's research look superficial. "Caldwell and Associates claims only 12% of current residents would be unable to afford housing in the redeveloped area. Their methodology is fundamentally flawed." He displayed census data, employment statistics, and housing cost analyses that painted a devastating picture. The actual number is closer to 78%. We're not talking about urban renewal, we're talking about erasure. But what struck Simone wasn't just his expertise. It was how he spoke about the community. He knew people by name, knew which families had lived there for 4 generations, knew about Mrs. Washington's garden that fed 3 dozen neighbors, about the youth center that kept kids off the streets, about the informal network of support that would be destroyed by their improvements. He spoke with respect, with intimacy, with love. After the meeting, Preston was furious. "Who does he think he is? That presentation was completely unprofessional. He made us look like villains." Simone's father was more measured but equally dismissive. "It's unfortunate, but he's fighting a losing battle. The votes are secured. This is just noise." Simone excused herself and found Bryce in the hallway, surrounded by community members thanking him. She waited until they dispersed, then approached hesitantly. "That was impressive," she said quietly. He turned, surprise flickering across his features before settling into polite neutrality. "Just doing my job." "It was more than that. You actually know these people. You care about them." She took a breath. "I'm sorry. About the proposal. About my assumptions the other day. About all of it. You were right. We didn't see them as families. We saw them as numbers on a spreadsheet." Bryce studied her for a long moment. "So what are you going to do about it?" The question hung between them, challenging and direct. Simone opened her mouth, then closed it. What could she do? Her entire career, her entire life, was built on this foundation. "I don't know," she finally admitted, "but I'm starting to realize I need to figure it out." Something in his expression softened slightly. "That's a start," he said. Then he walked away, leaving her standing alone in the empty hallway with the weight of her choices pressing down on her shoulders. The backlash began immediately. By the next morning, word had spread through Charleston's social circles that Simone had spoken to that troublemaker after the council meeting. Paige called before 8, her voice tight with concern. "People are talking, Simone. Preston's mother is asking questions. You need to do damage control." Sunday brunch was excruciating. Her mother's lips were pressed into a thin line as she served mimosas with aggressive precision. "I don't understand what you were thinking," Vivian said, her voice clipped. "Speaking to him in public where anyone could see. The Fairchilds are already concerned about your judgment." "I apologized for our firm's inadequate research," Simone said, trying to keep her voice steady. "That's professional courtesy, not treason." Dalton set down his coffee cup with deliberate force. "That man is trying to destroy a deal we've spent 2 years developing. He's cost us credibility and potentially millions in projected revenue. And you apologized to him." His face reddened. "I raised you better than this, Simone. I raised you to understand where your loyalties lie." Preston arrived after brunch, his jaw tight. They walked through the garden, maintaining the appearance of a romantic stroll while he delivered what was clearly a prepared speech. "My family has concerns. My mother thinks you're going through some kind of phase, maybe cold feet about the wedding. I told her that's ridiculous, that you understand what's at stake here." He stopped, turning to face her. "But do you, Simone? Do you understand what you're risking?" "I'm not risking anything," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I had a 5-minute conversation with someone who happens to be working against our proposal. That's all." "That's not all, and you know it." Preston's voice dropped lower. "People are watching. Every choice you make reflects on both our families. I need to know you're committed to us, to our future, to the life we're building together." He touched her engagement ring. "Are you?" Simone looked at the diamond, then at Preston's face, then at the estate behind them where her parents watched from the window. The weight of expectations pressed down like a physical force. "Of course I am," she heard herself say. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that she was lying. Simone didn't plan to see Bryce again. She told herself the conversation was closed. The moment had passed. She needed to focus on her wedding and her career and stop questioning everything she'd built. But 2 weeks later, she found herself at Morrison and Chen's office, clutching a folder of research she'd compiled on her own time, after hours, hidden from her father and Preston. Bryce's assistant looked skeptical when Simone gave her name. "Do you have an appointment?" She didn't, and they both knew showing up unannounced was inappropriate, possibly career-ending if the wrong people found out. But Bryce emerged from his office before she could retreat, surprise evident in his expression. "Ms. Caldwell, this is unexpected." She thrust the folder toward him. "Alternative displacement solutions. I looked at the numbers, really looked at them, and you were right. But there might be ways to develop the area without forcing everyone out. Mixed income housing, rent stabilization programs, community land trusts. I'm not an expert, but I thought maybe." She trailed off, suddenly aware of how presumptuous this was. Bryce took the folder, flipping through the pages. His expression shifted from skepticism to genuine interest. "This is good work, thorough." He looked up. "Why are you doing this?" The question was simple but devastating. Why was she doing this? She could lose everything. Her position at the firm, her father's respect, her engagement, her entire social standing. "Because I can't unsee what you showed me," she said finally. "Those families, they're real. And I've spent my whole life pretending they're not." Something in Bryce's expression softened. "Come in, let's talk." They spent 2 hours going through the research, Bryce pointing out flaws and strengths, suggesting additional resources, treating her ideas with serious consideration despite everything. At some point, the conversation shifted from policy to personal. "I grew up in the East Side," Bryce said quietly. "That neighborhood raised me. When my father died, Mrs. Washington fed my family for 3 months. When I got accepted to MIT, but couldn't afford the flight, the community took up a collection." "That's what your firm wants to demolish." Simone felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm so sorry. For all of it. For the proposal, for my assumptions, for every time I've been part of this system without questioning it." Her voice cracked. "I don't know how to fix it." "You can't fix it alone," Bryce said. "But you can choose to stop being complicit. That's what I had to figure out too." He smiled slightly. "You think I started out knowing all this? I was angry for years before I learned how to channel it into something productive." They talked until his assistant knocked to say she was leaving for the evening. Simone realized with shock that hours had passed. As she gathered her things, Bryce walked her to the elevator. "Thank you," she said, "for taking me seriously. For not dismissing me as just another privileged white woman playing at activism. We all start somewhere," Bryce said. "The question is whether you're willing to see it through when it gets hard." The elevator doors opened. "It will get hard, Simone. Are you ready for that?" She stepped into the elevator, meeting his eyes. "I guess I'm about to find out." The crisis came faster than Simone anticipated. Her father's administrative assistant mentioned seeing her at Morrison and Chen, and within 24 hours she was called into a closed-door meeting with Dalton and the firm's senior partners. Preston was there too, his presence making clear this wasn't just about business. "I want to understand what's happening," her father said, his voice dangerously calm. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my daughter is actively working against her own family's interests." Simone had prepared for this moment, had rehearsed arguments about corporate responsibility and community engagement and sustainable development. But facing the actual fury in her father's eyes, the disappointment in Preston's posture, the cold, judgment from the partners who'd mentored her since she was a child, all her careful words evaporated. "The proposal was wrong," she said simply. "We were wrong. Those families deserve better than what we were offering." The explosion was immediate. Preston stood so fast his chair fell backward. "Are you insane? Do you understand what you're throwing away?" Her father's face had gone from red to white, a dangerous sign she'd learned to recognize in childhood. But it was senior partner Garrett Brennan who delivered the killing blow. "Your position here is terminated, effective immediately. We cannot have someone actively sabotaging our projects from within." He slid a folder across the table. "These are the separation documents. You have 1 hour to clear your office." The elevator ride down felt surreal. Simone walked past colleagues who wouldn't meet her eyes, into her office with its view of the harbor, and began packing the remnants of a career she'd spent 8 years building. Paige appeared in the doorway, her expression a mix of pity and reproach. Was it worth it? Throwing everything away for what exactly? Some moral high ground that won't pay your bills? Before Simone could answer, her phone rang. Bryce's name appeared on the screen. She answered without thinking. "They fired me." "I know. I'm sorry." His voice was gentle. "For what it's worth, what you did took real courage." "Courage?" Simone laughed bitterly. "I just destroyed my life for a folder of research that won't change anything. The project will still get approved. Those families will still lose their homes, and I'll be the cautionary tale people tell about what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. Maybe, Bryce said. Or maybe you just took the first real stand of your life. Maybe that's worth something, he paused. There's a community meeting tonight about the development. If you want to actually help instead of just feeling sorry for yourself, you could show up. Let people know what you learned from the inside. The challenge in his words sparked something in Simone. He was right. She'd lost everything, but that meant she had nothing left to protect. No career to preserve, no reputation to maintain, no comfortable lie to keep living. Just a choice about who she wanted to be from this moment forward. Text me the address, she said. I'll be there. The community center in the east side was nothing like the spaces Simone was used to inhabiting. Folding chairs, fluorescent lights, coffee in styrofoam cups instead of bone china. But the room was packed with people who'd lived the consequences of policies she'd helped draft from air-conditioned offices. Bryce stood when she entered, surprise and approval mixing in his expression. He made space for her in the back. Halfway through the meeting, during the open comment period, Simone stood. Her hands shook as she walked to the microphone, feeling dozens of eyes on her, some curious, most hostile. My name is Simone Caldwell, she began, and the room erupted in angry murmurs. She pushed forward. I worked on the development proposal that's trying to displace you. I was part of the team that wrote those reports claiming only a small percentage of residents would be affected. I'm here to tell you that those reports were deliberately misleading. For the next 20 minutes, she outlined everything she'd learned, every manipulation of data, every strategic omission designed to minimize the appearance of harm while maximizing profit. She named names, cited specific documents, and burned every bridge she had left. When she finished, the room was silent. An elderly black woman in the front row stood slowly. Why should we believe you? You're one of them. You built your whole life on keeping us down. The accusation hung in the air, devastating in its accuracy. Simone looked at the woman, then at the faces around the room, then caught her own reflection in the dark window behind them. She saw herself clearly for the first time, not the polished professional or the dutiful daughter or the perfect fiancé, but someone who'd spent 28 years choosing comfort over conscience. You're right, she said, her voice breaking. I am one of them. I benefited from every system designed to keep you marginalized. I never questioned it because questioning would have been uncomfortable, and I valued my comfort more than your humanity. Tears streamed down her face now, and she didn't wipe them away. I can't undo the past. I can't give back the privilege I was born into or erase the harm I've participated in, but I can stop being complicit. I can use what I know to fight against the system instead of for it. That's what I'm choosing to do. Bryce moved to stand beside her as the room processed her words. She lost her job today, he said quietly, for bringing information to my firm about alternative development approaches, for choosing to do the right thing even when it cost her everything. He looked at Simone. That's not redemption, but it's a start. The elderly woman studied Simone for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then I guess we'll see if you mean it. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A door cracked open, a possibility of becoming someone different than who she'd been. Simone wiped her eyes and sat down, feeling lighter and more terrified than she'd ever felt in her life. The news crews showed up 2 days later when Simone held a press conference outside Caldwell & Associates. Bryce had tried to talk her out of it, warning that this level of public exposure would make her a permanent enemy to everyone she'd ever known. But Simone was done with half measures. If she was going to burn it all down, she might as well bring marshmallows. She wore jeans and a simple blouse instead of her usual designer suits, standing on the sidewalk where she'd once walked with such confidence. Reporters jostled for position as she unfolded her statement. I'm here to formally apologize to the East Side community for my role in developing a proposal designed to displace them from their homes while disguising the true impact. I'm also here to release internal documents that show how Caldwell and Associates systematically manipulated data to minimize the appearance of harm. The documents she released were damning. Emails discussing how to frame the displacement numbers, memos about targeting undesirable populations, strategies for overcoming community resistance, everything that would hold up in court if residents chose to sue, which she encouraged them to do. Her phone exploded with messages. Preston's the angriest. You've betrayed everyone who ever believed in you. Maybe she had. Or maybe she'd finally stopped betraying herself. That night, sitting in her mostly empty apartment, Preston had taken back the penthouse keys, Simone watched herself on the evening news. Former real estate executive turns whistleblower, the anchor announced. Her mother called crying. Her father called, threatening legal action. Paige called to say she never wanted to speak to her again, but Bryce called too. You okay? He asked, and Simone surprised herself by laughing. I've lost my career, my fiancé, my family, my entire social circle, and probably any chance of working in real estate again. I'm living on my savings in a studio apartment eating ramen. But yeah, I think I'm actually okay. Better than okay. I'm free. Want to get coffee tomorrow? Bryce asked. Morrison & Chen is looking for someone with insider knowledge of real estate development. Can't promise anything, but might be worth a conversation. Simone looked around her stripped-down apartment at the life she'd dismantled piece by piece. I'd like that, she said. I'd really like that. For the first time in her life, she had no idea what came next. And somehow, that felt exactly right. 6 months later, Simone stood in the renovated community center in the east side, surrounded by residents celebrating the approval of their alternative development plan. Mixed-income housing that would preserve existing residents while improving infrastructure. Community land trusts to prevent future displacement. Job training programs. Everything she and Bryce had outlined in those late-night working sessions, refined by actual community input instead of corporate projections. She'd learned more in 6 months at Morrison & Chen than in 8 years at her father's firm. She'd learned to listen instead of assuming she knew best. She'd learned that real expertise came from lived experience, not just degrees and certifications. She'd learned that transformation was possible but never comfortable, that growth required letting go of everything she thought defined her. Mrs. Washington approached the elderly woman who'd challenged her at that first community meeting. "You did good work here," she said, and the simple praise meant more than any award Simone had received in her previous career. Not perfect, but good. You listened when we told you what we needed. Bryce found her later, standing on the center's steps watching kids play basketball in the new court. "Thinking about the road not taken?" he asked. She shook her head. "Thinking about how much time I wasted on the wrong road, but also thinking I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He smiled, bumping her shoulder with his. "Your father's firm lost the contract, by the way. City Council voted them down after your testimony about their practices." Simone absorbed this without the guilt she might have felt months ago. Some bridges needed to burn. Some systems needed to fall apart before something better could be built. "My mom called yesterday," she said quietly. "First time since the press conference. She didn't apologize, but she asked questions about the work I'm doing now, about why it matters." She looked at Bryce. "It's not reconciliation, but it's something. That's how change happens," Bryce said. "One conversation at a time, one choice at a time. One person decided to do better than they did yesterday." He gestured to the community celebrating around them. "You helped make this possible. That ripple effect you started is spreading farther than you know." Simone watched the celebration, saw how one policy change had preserved hundreds of homes, kept families together, and maintained the fabric of a community that had endured despite every effort to erase it. She thought about the Simone who'd stood in the Sterling Hotel 6 months ago, suffocating in designer clothes and champagne, telling herself comfortable lies about merit and coincidence. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone still learning, still growing, still making mistakes, but at least making them in service of something that mattered. Simone pulled out her phone and composed a message to Paige, knowing it might never be answered but needing to try. "I'm sorry for how things ended. When you're ready, I'd like to tell you what I've learned. Not to convince you of anything, just to share the journey. The door's always open." She hit send and pocketed her phone. "Some bridges could be rebuilt. Others needed to stay burned. The wisdom was knowing which was which." Bryce nudged her. "Wait, come on. They're about to cut the cake and Mrs. Washington made it herself. Trust me, you don't want to miss this." Simone followed him into the celebration, into the community she'd once seen as numbers on a spreadsheet, into the life she'd built from the ashes of everything she'd lost. Every story changes a heart, she thought. Every heart changes the world. She was living proof that transformation was possible, messy and painful and absolutely worth it. Together we rise. Beautiful souls of the Racial Rise family, thank you for joining this journey of transformation with us. Before we continue, I want to connect with our amazing global community. Drop your country and city in the comments below. Let us know, what moment in today's story hit you the most? Your insights and reactions fuel our passion for creating these life-changing stories. Our goal is to build a community of 100 hearts in the comments. Each comment represents someone ready to rise above prejudice and choose love. Share this story, tag someone who needs to hear it, and let's create a ripple effect of positive change together. Remember, every story changes a heart, and every heart changes the world. You are part of the Racial Rise movement.